My name is Rabbi Scott Perlow. I'm the rabbi of Romemu, Brooklyn, an offshoot of Roma, Manhattan. I live here in Brooklyn in Crown Heights with my family. So I'm Jewish. There's a lot of different kinds of being Jewish. So I was ordained what's called a conservative rabbi. Conservative is a little bit funny because in the States, conservative actually is a liberal denomination. Now I'm what's called a renewal rabbi, which is sort of like liberal plus hippie. There's a lot of really great points of creativity and passion all over the States. I figured out that I didn't want to be a doctor like 80% of my freshman class. And I had a very close relationship with a rabbi growing up, and I loved him. I stayed in touch with him. And so I called him up because I wanted to tell him about something I had. He was a very smart guy. I wanted to tell him about something I'd learned in class. And he sort of cut through all of that. And he said, so your father tells me that you don't want to be a doctor anymore. So I'd talk too long, and he cut me off, and he just said, just go to the seminary and get it over with already. It's a true story. And then I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, I went to 6 years of rabbinical school after college because there's pieces of it where you have to master a few dead languages. And then you also have to a few dead languages. I mean, different kinds of Hebrew and Hebrew related stuff. And then you spend a lot of time reading, studying ancient sources, but there's also professional classes that you take. Like you learn how to counsel people, and you learn the basics of how to sit on a nonprofit board. But the truth is that after all that stuff, a lot of it is kind of figuring out who you are. We are a family first and a religion second. And that family had a relation, sort of a little bit of a spiritual affair. And ever since then, we've been figuring it out. In New York, I think on the one hand, in a very big cold city, it's important to know your village and to know who you're connected to. You have to be able to express the truth of your existence out in the world, and sometimes that's best done through the particular spiritual, cultural identity language that you yourself can speak. And when you do that with other people who are like you, that becomes very rich. And on the other hand, religion also serves to separate people in New York City and took a lot of strife and a lot of difficulty. So I'm of two minds about it. I'm always fascinated by how some people are very certain about the afterlife. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me, even as I don't really understand, because in a world of relative uncertainty, that's the most uncertain thing there is, which is if anything happens to us after we die. So I've never really quite understood how passionate people are about the afterlife. Now, my dad died about 5-6 years ago at this point. I think it was 5 years ago. And because I'm a rabbi, I'm also around people as they're leaving this world. And there is something inside me that has a strong intuition that we don't just disappear. I think that there is a piece of me that yearns or that feels welded to the idea that there's more to us than just this. So there's a way we either believe or we intuit that the idea that oh, there's a heaven and then God sits in the heaven, there's a throne, none of that really makes a ton of sense. So, but for people who aren't overly obsessed with belief, there is a really strong belief that God spoke the world into being, and that whatever divinity was there before space, before time, before everything that was ever created, right? So with words, let there be light, everything sort of sprung into existence, so that we're all sort of connected like a tree with branches and roots. You go back to the source of that which created you. It's a misnomer, by the way, that Jews don't believe in hell. We just only have a temporary one. And which is called Gehenna, where we make you uncomfortable for about 11 months. It's a very Jewish way of thinking about it. And then whatever is going to happen to you. But we're not particularly clear as a religion. Even someone who I think is relatively knowledgeable about it, I couldn't actually tell you it goes from point A to point B to point. There's actually sort of a jumble of things that we say about the afterlife.
Yeah.
And part of that is because we're not as focused on it as, for example, Christians are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I have this sense that we're all branches of the same tree. And when the leaf falls, we just all when it withers and fades, we just all go back to our roots. Strangely, they keep talking to you. I mean, I promise you I don't need to be medically evaluated. I mean, like, sometimes you encounter them or you hear them, and it could all be wishful thinking. But there are ways in which I hear my father better than when I could hear him when he was alive. I don't know if those who are dead are really gone, for whatever it's worth. Yeah. I'm still trying to figure out why they do such a bad job of it, and why they're willing to accept so much human suffering in order to realize their utopia. And I don't know if I'm a redemptionist anymore, because I've seen the way that people swing one way and another with their vision of how the world ought to be, and that sometimes the rest of us get caught up quite painfully in the changes that they're trying to make. I wish we had done better for you.
Joan King, the Roman Catholic. Well, because I went to Catholic school, so automatically are in, and I went to high school, a Catholic high school too. So I went to school with the nuns. But my mother and father both were Catholic, and they both went to Mass on Sundays and holy days, and you know that. And those beliefs stick with them. Usually they last a lifetime. And with me, for instance, we have church in the building. It's just a Mass service, and then I watch the Mass on television. I get a lot of comfort out of that. So, you know, it's nice to know that I can still celebrate my religion. It was always part of me. You know, I went to Catholic school, grammar school, high school, and I always believed in the church. Afterlife is with spending the rest of eternity with God. That's the answer. If you're a religious person, I mean, of course, if you're not a good person, you don't get to go to heaven. But the goal of anybody that's religious is to, you know, to get to heaven. How am I doing, Vicki? Well, of course, you know, it is comforting, because then you know that there's something else out there. You get to not really know God, but you know Him to a certain degree. And that's what's comforting, because you know that there is another afterlife. A lot of bad vibes out there, you might call it. You know, it's understandable. The more people that are on Earth, the more problems you have. If you live in an isolated area, you don't have all those problems. Mostly everybody believes the same thing that you do. Because it keeps you in line, I think, you know, because you know, if you get too far away, you're not going to have the afterlife you'd want to have. When I got married, the girls wore the same color blue that was in her gown, and the Blessed Mother's always stood by me. I've always felt her presence. That's my feeling, you know. I try to be as good as I can. I tried, but you know, some people don't want to accept it. You know, it can be trying at times. You never know.
That's true.
That's what my friend always says. You never know. It's just the way I was brought up. People were more religious years ago, but I think that people have grown away from it. You're going to be a movie star?
You did very well, Mom.
Oh, thank you.
My name is Jay-Z, and I am a documentary film teacher here at Girls Make Movies. As a child, I was raised Catholic, so I guess Catholic, Christian, Roman Catholic. But as I grew older, I started connecting more with Buddhism and meditation. So that's sort of my connection to religion through my life. What drives my religious involvement? Well, as when I was more of a practicing Buddhist, really what drove my involvement with organized religious communities, meditation communities, was the feeling of peace that it gave me from attending meditation retreats and being around other practitioners of Buddhism. That was very uplifting for me. How is religion linked to my identity? I would say as a young person, being raised in the Catholic Church was it shaped my identity in ways that I don't think I even understood as a young person. I was really involved with my church. I was an altar server. I went on a lot of youth retreats just because it gave me something to do. It just informs the way my moral compass directs itself, and like my sense of right and wrong and of judgment even. I think religion can give a lot of people hope, and I think it can give a lot of people structure when their lives are sort of falling apart. I think a lot of people turn to religion when their lives are kind of falling apart for guidance. And I think that New York is a really rough city to be in, so I'm sure people use religion to just deal with the chaos. I don't necessarily think my spirit's not going to enter that of a stray dog or a blade of grass. I have no way of knowing that. And that is maybe informed by my Buddhist sense of the afterlife. Honestly, my idea of the afterlife, now that I'm older, I'm much more at peace with it. I think as you grow closer to death, you have to kind of accept that it's also a part of life. How have I noticed different religions interacting in New York City? I often see them sort of confronting each other on the street, for lack of a better word, but I think those confrontations turn into dialogues and conversations. And I think New York is the kind of place where people can have their differences and talk about them, but then also respect that we all live here in this place together. How do I envision Utopia? I picture like just a vast expanse of light, just pure bright light, and people bathed in that very welcoming kind of spiritual healing light. I don't know if that is a thing that can happen in reality, but that's how I imagine Utopia, is just a place that is illuminated in many ways, metaphorically, physically, spiritually, and a place that just feels very light and open and safe at the same time. Religion can offer a means of utopia, but I think it's mostly an illusion.